The sympathetic dominants tend to develop hard tumours, so the lung cancers, the liver cancers, brain tumours, etc. Whereas the parasympathetic dominant people tend to develop soft cancers, so lymphomas, leukemias, things like that. People need to step back and remove themselves from a lot of the noise and the toxic shit that's out there. That doesn't make them wealthier, it doesn't make them happier, it doesn't make them healthier. When we consume food, it's information and it affects everything in the gut and the immune system, which in turn affects the brain. There is a huge relationship, huge connection.
Inder, I really appreciate you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
I'd like to start with a question because I've never heard who is a nutritional therapist. What do they do?
So, in essence, you've probably heard of dietitians, possibly nutritionists. Well, nutritional therapists are a separate discipline in themselves. So in essence, dietitians and nutritionists aim to optimize your nutrient intake, so your vitamins, your minerals, your proteins, your fats, predominantly through diet. That is their prime goal. And dietitians are strictly governed by governing board, the British Dietetics Association, and pretty much everything they recommend is based on what BDA recommends. And the dietitian's goal is just to achieve optimal, or just achieve function through vitamins and minerals, in essence, and to meet those levels. Whereas nutritionists and nutritional therapists, we aim to optimize health through diet and supplements. And we use typically much, much higher levels of nutrients through diet and through supplements to achieve optimal health outcomes. And in essence, nutritional therapists, we try to address the root cause of a condition. So you may have heard of functional medicine, maybe, which comes from the US. So many nutritional therapists are functional medicine practitioners as well. And their goal, again, is to try and identify the root causes of a condition through various tests, through blood tests, stool tests, urine tests. And the goal is to optimize, to address the root cause and optimize function.
And how did you get into nutritional therapist?
So, a very long story. Basically, I was working in high-end hospitality, working for people like Gordon Ramsay, Heston Blumenthal, having a great time. And basically, I developed chronic fatigue syndrome. So I was probably like a lot of young 20-year-olds, burning the candle at both ends, developed flu-like symptoms, and pretty much I didn't get out of bed till I was about 26, 27.
Wow.
And as you can imagine, bounced between different GPs, different specialists, practitioners of all persuasions. No one was really able to help me. And that was until I met a nutritional therapist who had worked with people like myself. Because at the time I was playing high-level squash as well. So he'd worked with a lot of athletes who had sort of burnout, chronic fatigue syndrome. And through various supplements and dietary changes, I was able to get most of my strength back and able to finish my degree and get better.
So in terms of like feeling really fatigued, were there any other symptoms that you had during that time?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, the biggest symptom was probably brain fog, which is a weird thing. I don't know if you guys have heard of it before.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
I mean, I think long COVID has made it, or COVID has made it quite a sexy term now.
Yeah.
I just wanted to touch a bit on long COVID as well.
Yeah, of course.
What is it exactly?
What is long COVID?
Yeah.
So in essence, whenever we experience a viral infection, we should have typical symptoms: fever, potentially, obviously, fatigue, many other symptoms, fever, etc. In theory, the immune system should shut itself off. So the immune system should react, respond, and you should recover within a couple of weeks. For various reasons that we don't quite know yet, that the immune system doesn't shut off in the usual way that it should do. And the virus is effectively unable to be cleared out by the immune system. And you develop what's known as a low-grade viral infection, a chronic infection. And long COVID is essentially very similar to chronic fatigue, except for you can experience this thing called dysautonomia, which is a dysregulation in heart rate, breathing rate, and people feel very dizzy. Their heart rate and their blood pressure spikes up and down very randomly. And also shortness of breath. Long COVID really affects the lungs. Whereas chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia, not so. You don't really experience those symptoms.
Yeah, just let's go back to other symptoms. So brain fog. What else is there?
You mean when I was struggling with
Yes,
CFS?
yes, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, so for me...
I think we just jump in front.
Yeah, no, of course, yeah, no worries. So for me, it was outright exhaustion. Just no matter how much I slept, was unable to get out of bed. Nothing seemed to improve it. And the most frustrating thing for CFS patients is it's just random. Some days are better than others. Some days they can walk around the house, do some housework, maybe go out. But then other days they just completely crash. So for me, it was the same. Big fatigue, brain fog, low mood as well, naturally. And people think it's just because you're fatigued, but there are many other mechanisms that drive that anxiety, depression. What else was there? For me, I lost a lot of weight. I mean, I'm a slim guy anyway, as you can see. I lost a lot of weight. IBS symptoms. I was chronically constipated. At my worst, I was taking a whole pack of Senecot to just get my bowels moving.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And there was another symptom as well. For me, I had a lot of like autoimmune type reactions. So I had a lot of eczema and my asthma flared up quite badly.
So you go to you go and sort of talk to a nutritional therapist, and you've got all these issues. What advice did they give you from that point moving forward? What did you have to change?
So I must emphasize, my situation was quite extreme.
Yes.
So in essence, for me, it was what is probably now known as an autoimmune paleo type diet. So I don't know if you're familiar with paleo diet.
So I'm not about I know about autoimmune illnesses, but like have you heard of like Michaela Peterson or like Jordan Peterson?
Yes, yeah.
So they have this autoimmune syndrome or illness or disease. I'm not even sure how to describe it, but they treat it by just eating red meat.
Yeah,
like beef.
That's more kind of carnivore.
Yeah.
So the autoimmune paleo diet is in essence plenty of meat of all kinds, once or twice a day. But the biggest change is cutting out a lot of the crap. So fast food, anything that comes in a bag or a box. But also with the autoimmune part of the paleo diet, is cutting out things like nightshades. So white potatoes, tomatoes, okra, basically anything with a seed, aubergines.
Hey guys, thank you so much for making it this far into the podcast. If you have any feedback, then please let us know, as we always want to make this podcast better. So hearing from you is always a pleasure. Please subscribe to all of our platforms, get involved at Triangle Theory. If you've got any comments or if you want to share any topics that you think that me and Conrad would like to talk about, then please get involved. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much.
All of those types of vegetables. And for me personally, that was a big change for me. As in terms of I saw a big improvement when I did that. And of course, the most obvious being eight portions of vegetables a day, but very specific types of vegetables. I can list them if you like.
Yeah. I've been really interested.
Yeah. So sprouting broccoli,
Okay.
cauliflower, leeks, onions of all kinds, turnips, Swedes, green beans. Probably forgetting a couple, but those are the core ones.
Okay.
Every single day, at least twice a day, and
Wow.
ideally 2 to 3 cups per meal.
And what about fruit?
Fruit in general, in my experience, is overrated.
Is it?
I think, yeah. There was a really interesting study done I think it was 2014 by UCL, and what it showed was essentially they took 60,000 people and observed them over 10, 15 years. They wanted to see who developed illness. And what they found was the people eating up to 8 portions of vegetables per day had something like a 50, 60% decreased risk of all the scary things like cancer, heart disease, mental health issues, the list goes on, diabetes, of course, versus the people who ate more fruits. And the risk reduction, that difference was significant. It was about 50% reduction in the vegetable group and only about 10% in the fruit group. So fruits, personally, I think are massively overrated, with the exception of berries. And we'll probably get onto brain health as well. Berries are enormously beneficial for the brain.
Is that simply because just for like the sugar content in fruits, or?
It's a few reasons. It's more just their lack of the nutrients that are contained in vegetables.
Yeah.
So there are some very potent antioxidants that help neurons and brain cells adapt and connect to each other and repair, but most of those compounds are in vegetables, not fruits, with the exception of certain berries.
So in terms of general diet, how do processed foods and modern diets contribute to chronic health issues?
So, there are four main ways.
Okay.
So the first is fiber and fat. So we know that people who consume a lot of refined carbohydrates, so these are things like wheat flour that's been heavily refined so that pretty much most of the fiber has been extracted away, has a very different effect on the gut microbes. So if you're familiar with the gut microbiome, you've probably heard of it. So in our guts, we have around 50 trillion bacteria, and there's roughly around 30 to 40 trillion cells in our body. So actually the bacteria outnumber us. It used to be 100. A lot of people used to say 100 to 1, but that's not true. And in essence, when we're consuming a lot of refined fiber, refined carbohydrates, it changes the composition, because you're favoring certain bacteria that either have a neutral effect or potentially negative effect. Whereas if you're consuming a lot of plant-based or whole foods, you are feeding potentially the beneficial bacteria.
Just a quick one. So that it does it depend on the person themselves? As in, let's just say for you, for example, it works that that you're eating a lot of vegetables, and then it helps to reduce the microbiomes. Whereas, for example, for a person like Michaela Peterson, who does only meat, does it? I guess my question is, does it depend on the autonomy of the human itself, or it varies from person to person?
110% absolutely. And we were going to talk more about Alzheimer's, for example. At the moment, what I'm about to say is not, how can I say, at the moment it's slightly a niche concept, but as the years go by, we're definitely going to see it emerge as a very prominent theme in the treatment of a lot of diseases, but a lot of sort of neuro diseases as well. It's this idea that actually most diseases stem from an imbalance in what is called the autonomic nervous system. And so I don't know if you've heard of the ANS, the autonomic nervous system.
Yeah.
Oh, you've heard of it. Okay. So essentially there's three branches to it. I mean, textbook says two, but there's actually three. We have the parasympathetic branch of our brains, if you like, the nervous system. So the parasympathetic is responsible for our rest and digest functions and healing and detoxification. And the sympathetic is our fight and flight. So when you've got a deadline, when you're stressed, it's your sympathetic firing. And then there's the third branch, which is the enteric nervous system, which is the sum of all the nerves that travel through the gut. And there are actually more neurons in the enteric nervous system than the spinal cord, which is quite interesting. And in essence, the theory goes that an imbalance in one of these two, so some people can be too parasympathetic or too sympathetic, that will manifest in disease or dysfunction. So to come back to your question, parasympathetics or parasympathetic dominant people, these people, because their parasympathetic system is slightly stronger, they are more prone to fatigue, sensitivity, lethargy, as I mentioned, emotional sensitivity, mental health issues. And these people tend to be your more creative type people as well.
That's interesting.
That's very interesting.
Yeah. And anyway, these types of people, the parasympathetic people, tend to do better on plenty of red meat, carnivore, paleo type diets. And the reason being is that red meat, for example, is very rich in sulfates and phosphates and B vitamins that stimulate the sympathetic system and bring it back into balance. So the answer to your question is it completely depends on the person. And sorry, just to complete what I was saying, the sympathetic dominance. So these are people who tend to be your type A personality, the impatient bastards, the bosses, the really the stereotypical horrible boss.
The CEOs
tend to be the stereotypical CEO. Tend to be very sympathetic dominant, and these people tend to do better on vegetarian/vegan diets.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Because if they're eating too much animal protein, it's stimulating the sympathetic and it's making them strong. It's making it stronger and exacerbating these personality traits.
So how do you go then about finding your optimal diet, and what is an optimal diet?
So what is an optimal diet? So it depends what you're looking to achieve. So I sit in a more niche area of what I do in health, and I like to think at least that I'm trying to help somebody fulfill their genetic potential.
Yeah.
So there are two answers. So there are two prongs to this answer. The first is if you just want to improve your health in general. So if you're living a London lifestyle and you just want to maybe improve your sleep and just feel a bit better, then the answer to that is the basic things that we've all read about. So improving the sleep, cutting out some of the crap, increasing your vegetable intake, maybe taking a couple supplements, and that should help you improve to some extent. However, I'm much more interested in helping a human fulfill their genetic potential and really being optimal. Some argue that in this modern world that we live in, which is heavily polluted now, full of digital stressors and every stressor, emotional stressor, media, etc., it's very, very difficult to achieve absolute health anymore, only relative health. But I'm generally an optimist, so I like to think that people can still achieve their genetic potential, but it's hard. And the truth is, we have to make a choice in this world, at least if we want to live in the Western world, which is we either participate and sacrifice our health a little bit, or we retreat and become very disciplined, remove ourselves from major cities and live in nature. And then you can potentially become closer. So I realize I haven't answered your question yet, but to optimize health or to fulfill your genetic potential, it's all about addressing this balance, this imbalance in your autonomic nervous system. That is achieved through following a very strict diet for at least a few months, as I mentioned. For some people, it's more vegetarian and more higher plant fat based. For some people, it's more meat and more animal fat based. So addressing the diet is absolutely crucial, and most importantly, avoiding eating out at all. And basically eating anything that comes from a bag or a box is absolutely fundamental. And then using supplements to try and help rebalance that, the autonomic balance as well. And also just living, we're getting a bit more sort of spiritual and esoteric, but trying to live just very, very, how can I say, humble and traditional values as well, which is very difficult, I know, in this world. Living a very simple life and not chasing the material things.
Going back to that parasympathetic state and sympathetic state. So, would you say a patient would undergo a sort of psychiatric sort of understanding their characteristics, understanding who they are, before then sort of issuing a proposed diet plan? So, like you were saying, like more parasympathetic state, or people that have more of that in their nervous system are sort of more creative, or you've got your sympathetic state that are more CEO types. So is that how you address, is sort of trying to understand what they're like as people?
It's a really interesting question. I think, obviously we live in the modern world. A lot of people don't want to come into my clinic, certainly, and just say, look, I've got these symptoms, sort me out.
Yeah.
In the background, I'm observing their personality and their life and their psychology. But what I find pretty consistently is if you address the physical issues first, so again, using supplements, potentially addressing root causes, in my experience at least, patients will come back and say, God, you know what, I feel so much calmer now. Like my boss will have a go at me and I don't feel so wound up. And that's because indirectly, by readdressing that balance in the autonomic nervous system, you're addressing a lot of psychological issues anyway.
So how do you go then about finding the right balance? Like your that was an extreme example where you went through GPs, all of these different doctors to find what works for you. But let's just say like an average Joe, that everything is kind of fine with him, but he wants to optimize the way he appears in life. And what would be the first steps to know to know what sort of diet you should follow?
So there is a doctor called Nicholas Gonzalez. So this work that I've described, so I didn't actually really explain where it came from. So in the early 30s and 40s, there were several physiologists around the world who were mapping out the nervous system and trying to figure out its functions and how it affects us. And one of them was a guy called Francis Pottinger. I think it was in the 20s or 30s. and he mapped out the nervous system and discovered this idea that the autonomic nervous system can cause, let me rephrase that, an imbalance in the autonomic nervous system results in disease and dysfunction. Anyway, a very long story short, this work was forgotten, but picked up by a dentist called William Kelly, who I think, if I remember correctly, was diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic cancer in his liver and had like loads of kids, and he had a business, and he refused to give up and discovered this work, and by using the things the tools that I mentioned, the diet and the supplements, was able to get himself out of that situation. And anyway, that work then passed on to a gentleman called Nicholas Gonzalez, who is no longer with us, sadly, but had an incredible reputation in the US for treating cancers of all types using this approach. And anyway, since his passing, his family, or whoever, his protege, a lady called Linda Isaacs in New York, published this questionnaire that you can do, and it will give you it will tell you exactly which state your autonomic nervous system is in, and which diet that you need.
Wow.
So that I use that questionnaire.
Okay, but what sort of questions are in this questionnaire?
So it's been a while since I've looked at it, to be honest, but it's largely psychological. So asking stuff about how you handle stress, what is your general mood like, your resilience, how do you bounce back from situations, and physical symptoms as well. So what's interesting as well in this work, in theory, the sympathetic dominants tend to develop hard tumours, so the lung cancers, the liver cancers, brain tumours, etc. Whereas the parasympathetic dominant people tend to develop soft cancers, so lymphomas, leukemias, things like that. So this questionnaire was actually designed for cancer patients. So it will also figure out the type of tumours you have and correlate. But I think if I remember correctly, it's like 300 questions. It's quite intense.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Don't quote me.
I thought it was going to be like 12 or 11.
Yeah, no. Sorry, it's maybe not 300. It's about 100.
Oh, wow.
About 100, yeah. Sorry, about 100, not 300.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, is there sort of any core foods that run across both APS groups? So, for example, top 3 foods that someone can just go and get now and start eating, and that will get them into a good state.
Well, yeah, 110%. So the vegetables that I mentioned.
Yeah.
So again, I'll run through them one more time. So cruciferous vegetables. So sprouting broccoli, not regular broccoli.
Yeah.
White cauliflower or purple cauliflower, if you can find it. The ones I left out: cabbages, leeks, which I mentioned. What else? Brussels sprouts, green beans, onions of all kinds, turnips and Swedes. If you can eat those 8-9 vegetables every day, you'll be winning.
Really?
Usually the reason being is because they're very rich in particular compounds. Some compounds we haven't even discovered in them, but things like sulforaphane, flavonoids, there are lots of different compounds that work to support detoxification, but also have a very healing effect on the nervous system.
Next question.
Yeah.
For those that I don't know, supplement it either with drinks, or would you say that cooking those and eating those vegetables are better, or would you say blitz them up and drink them, or is it just over convenience?
So as I mentioned, the sympathetic guys do better on a vegetarian / vegan-y raw diet, but they are rarer. They are becoming a rarer breed now because of the modern world. In my experience, most people benefit from cooked vegetables. So by all means, I do recommend soups.
Yeah.
So I have like a homemade cup of soup recipe that I put all these vegetables in, and you just make a huge pot and you drink it every day as a substitute for people who are on the go. I'll share it with you guys.
Please, yeah, please.
Yeah, I'll do that.
I mean, I'm also in the hospitality sector, so I would be all over that.
Yeah.
I think also going to it as well is obviously like vegetable oils and the increase of that being used. I mean, even in sort of in the kitchens when I work, like it's so heavily prevalent in everyone's cooking, isn't it?
It is, and sometimes I walk past restaurants and you see the big vats of oil, and it's been hydrolyzed or hydrogenated, and there's preservatives in there. Because correct me if I'm wrong, from your days, would you keep the fire on all day or just for services? Would you change the oil?
So we changed the oil I think it's pretty much every 3 days, and that will be drained or filtered, and then we could either reuse that, but predominantly we change it for new oil. But those fries are cleaned. I mean, in terms of frying, we're not doing like heavy frying, so it's not like burgers and chips. We tend to use tempura batters for our style of food. So it's a bit more light frying, just because I understand, like, you know, anything deep fried is not great per se, or using those harsh vegetable oils is
Yeah, I mean, frying, I think there's nothing wrong with frying, and actually some people think that frying helps lock in certain nutrients. So things like blue corn, for example, people say that if you fry it, it actually preserves the nutrients.
No
like
way.
if you like blue corn chips that you can buy from a health food shop, for example, are not too bad. And even the Japanese, obviously, like, you know, fried a lot of things. If frying's done correctly with the right oil, it's not reused, it hasn't been, you know, the fryer hasn't been on all day, and then frying is absolutely fine for a lot of people. Fried food is fine. It's just the oils that they're fried in, and the length of time that the heat that the fryer is on.
So, like you say, with olive oil, because it's got a lesser smoke point than a vegetable oil, would you recommend more cooking with things like olive oils over seed oils?
So it depends. So if you're just talking general cooking or deep frying again,
Just
anything.
General cooking. Let's say cooking vegetables and the vegetables that you've recommended.
So 100%, olive oil is far better.
Okay.
Definitely far better than rapeseed oil and sunflower oil, because generally, the oils that restaurants use tend to be sunflower or rapeseed. 100%. But just something to bear in mind. So olive oil is known as a monounsaturated fat, just like avocado oil or avocados. And that, which means the mono, meaning that it's got one double bond in its structure, and that double bond makes it vulnerable to reactivity with heat and oxygen, and then you change the structure. So if you are, for example, roasting, potatoes in the oven with lots of olive oil, just be aware that you are still damaging that fat, and that molecule will still be absorbed into the body and can sometimes cause problems. So shallow frying, cooking an omelette or whatever in olive oil, perfect. Roast your potatoes once a week, it's fine. But I generally recommend roasting or deep frying in saturated fats. And nature's amazing when you think about it. Like when we were cavemen, most of the fats that we were exposed to were either saturated from, eating a cow or a pig or whatever, or in plants, in sunflower seeds and in plants in general. Those are really the only two fats that we were exposed to. But in terms of cooking, it was only ever the meat on the fire. Mm-hmm. So saturated fats were designed to withstand heat, because saturated meaning that the carbon chains are saturated, so there are no double bonds on there, which means that there's less or no reactivity with oxygen and heat.
Mm. I know we're going a bit off topic here, but I just really want to ask you this question. Dairy. Did you stem away from all dairy when you were cutting out things in your diet?
I personally did, and that's because I'm a very sensitive sausage. And I had asthma as well growing up, and I was just always a bit more sensitive to it. Okay. And then when I developed the CFS, I became really sensitive. But dairy is a wonderful food. There's no doubt about it. It's very rich in fat-soluble vitamins, obviously calcium. It's a wonderful food if you can eat it. Obviously very high in protein as well. Yeah. Absolutely fine.
Okay. Because I'm also just thinking for the average Joe, because there's like so many milks out there, like cow's milk, like almond milk, cashew milk, like every single milk. Is there any specific milk?
Coconut milk.
Coconut milk. Because everyone keeps saying you should have almond milk. Actually, no, almond milk's too sugary. No, you should be changing it to oat milk. Actually, no, oat milk's too sugary.
Well, I'll just emphasize, if you can tolerate dairy, so if you drink dairy or eat some cheese, right, and you don't feel bloated, you don't feel brain fogged, you don't get itchy skin, or you don't break out in acne, and your bowel habits don't change, dairy is absolutely fine.
Okay.
So go for it. In terms of the alternative milks, as you say, they're highly processed, highly refined. If I'm not mistaken, not coconut oil, oat milk has sunflower oil in it, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And what I don't know is if they actually heat the oil up in the manufacturing process. That I'm not sure of. If they do, then stay away from it. The milk that I personally enjoy is cocoa milk, Koko. I don't know if you know it. It's coconut milk, basically, but it's so neutral. It behaves like milk when you cook with it. it's got a very neutral taste. I love it. And that's what I recommend generally.
Okay. Just going back to the vegetable oil quickly. So there's obviously been a lot of activity on social media with the idea around industrial oils are not as bad as everyone sort of makes out. What are your thoughts on this? Is it fictional hype, basically?
I'm laughing because it's a very complex topic, and it's not a very sexy topic actually. I've been meaning for ages to write an article and like give some talks at a conference on it, but I must have spent a good 250 hours of research into this, and just realised that I just got a bit overwhelmed, and I thought I'll come back to it, and then. But anyway, I did eventually come back to it. So, where to start? So the general narrative, if you go into Diary of a CEO, for example, seed oils are toxic. Seed oils cause problems. They cause inflammation. They increase your risk of cancer, etc. So where to start? Let's just start with the basics. Seed oils, what do we mean? So they are sunflower oil, rapeseed oil, if we're in the UK in general. Sometimes corn oil, but that's exceptional. In the US, it's either canola oil, which is rapeseed oil, or soybean oil, or corn oil. All of these oils, all of these plants are very high in omega-6. So you've probably all heard of like omega-3 fish oils. So omega-6 is like the cousin molecule. And omega-6 is vitally important in its raw form. I need to emphasize this, in its raw form. So in a plant structure, it's vitally important because in our cells, so as you probably appreciate or remember from biology, we're all made up of 50 trillion cells, roughly. And around the cell is something called the cell membrane. And the cell membrane is also known as the intelligence of the cell. And to put this in perspective, a lot of people think the nucleus is the intelligence of the cell. But you can take a nucleus out or like in a Petri dish, you can take the nucleus out and the cell will survive for about a week.
No way.
If you puncture the cell membrane, it lasts less than a day. It lasts a few hours.
Wow.
Roughly a quarter to a third of this cell membrane is made up of plant omega-6. So the original form omega-6 structure, linoleic acid. I'll repeat that, linoleic acid. That omega-6 that I just described, that makes up about a third of the cell membrane, outnumbers omega-3 by about 4 to 1. The ratio is an estimate, it's 4 to 6 to 1 roughly. So that's vitally important to understand. However, when we then cook with these oils, again, the sunflower oil, the rapeseed oil, we're heating those molecules up and they contain multiple double bonds. So they're known as polyunsaturated fatty acids, poly meaning multiple or more than one. These double bonds make this omega-6 molecule very vulnerable to heat and damage, and you change that molecular structure. And when that happens, the body will process and detoxify a lot of those fats out, but some of them will be shunted into the cell membrane in the wrong structure, in the wrong shape. And that is fine. We have huge resilience. We have huge redundancy built into our system to deal with that, but at a price, which is the consumption of antioxidants. Because what is happening is you are shunting in a molecule that's been damaged and it's far more vulnerable to reacting with oxygen. And the immune system and the antioxidant systems have to then effectively try and counter that and repair that damage, which is fine. But if you're living in a modern world, stressing, not eating as many vegetables as you should, you are going to increase the likelihood of oxidative stress. You're going to accelerate your aging. You're going to increase the risk of inflammation. You're going to increase your risk of cancers. And this is the important bit. So, and by the way, just to emphasize, I've literally, in my research, I was reaching out to organic chemists and experts in these fat molecules. They were not able to answer. A lot of them weren't able to answer the questions and the things that I'm telling you right now. So the omega-6 molecule in its raw form, that if we had a sunflower seed, that raw form linoleic acid molecule has just the right number of double bonds. And that is important because, as I mentioned, they should be in the cell membrane that allows the transfer of oxygen across the cell membrane. So this omega-6 molecule is perfectly structured, perfectly designed. It's not an accident, perfectly designed by nature to allow the transfer of oxygen across the cell membrane. That is important because obviously we need oxygen for energy, but also on Diary of a CEO, they had a guest, his name, Professor Seyfried. I don't know if you watched the episode, a cancer expert. And he was talking about the Warburg effect. And Otto Warburg is this scientist, Jewish Nobel Prize winning biochemist, and discovered that if you deprive a cell of oxygen long enough, even just by 20-30%, the cell can turn cancerous. So if you've got the right amount of omega-6 or the right types of omega-6 in the raw forms in the cell membrane, you have this optimal oxygen transfer. So in theory, you significantly reduce the risk of developing cancers because you've got optimal oxygenation. If, as I mentioned, you're shunting in loads of fats that have been heated for long periods of time, so again, through your crisps, or your fish fingers, or restaurants, whatever it is, you're shunting in these damaged fats into the cell membrane and consuming more antioxidants, or you're stressing the antioxidant system, which is already quite overburdened with modern life. So, in essence, if you're consuming huge amounts of vegetable oils, just be aware that you are going to be draining your antioxidants. So you need more antioxidants to counteract that damage. Longer term, accelerated aging, increased risk of inflammation, increased risk of cancer, and heart disease as well. We haven't talked about heart disease. Fatty acids are very, very important in the context of heart disease. I'm sorry, that was a bit of a ramble.
No,
that
that was really interesting. In terms of your consumption, how often are people consuming these foods if they're at risk?
Well, I mean, there are some people who literally consume these fatty acids every meal, literally every meal for years and years. And that's one of the arguments that a lot of people say, well, we're consuming loads of it and we're absolutely fine. You are, because if you're assuming you don't have any health issues or chronic fatigue, your antioxidant system will be quite robust and you'll be very efficient at recycling antioxidants and being able to repair that damage, until all of a sudden you can't. Until you start getting into your late 30s, into your 40s, you become more stressed, you've got the kids, you've got marriage, blah, 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 and you're draining that antioxidant system and it's unable to repair that damage. And all of a sudden, one day you wake up and you look wrinkled and you just think, what the fuck's just happened to me? And that's that phenomenon I just described is the antioxidant system being drained by these fatty acids.
Wow.
And other things.
Yeah.
So stress also being a huge factor as well.
Hugely.
So foods you eat, are you getting enough sleep? What does your overall stress look like? Any other factors that people should be looking at?
I mean, those are big enough in themselves, to be honest with you. What I'd say is, we just touched on stress, and it's important to emphasize. Stress, I mean, a lot of people think of stress as purely psychological. Oh, they're weak-willed, or they're just a bit sensitive. They can't handle it, they can't hack it. But what people forget is that stress is a physiological response, right? Driven by a set of glands and organs in the body that release hormones. It's a physical system. So if someone isn't coping with stress well, it can often be a sign of an imbalance in their bodies, in their nervous systems, unsurprisingly. So again, if you address the physical things through the diet, through some supportive supplements, your stress tolerance can significantly improve. Like I mentioned, people come back and say, oh my God, I can't believe it. Like, my wife's nagging me, but it doesn't bother me anymore. And there's also psychological aspects to it as well. But because all of a sudden you've strengthened the nervous system, the body goes, oh, I can deal with this. Actually, I have the energy. And actually, one thing I must emphasize as well, when it comes to health, the most important currency is energy. And we forget this, energy. Energy is the source. People think it's food and various other things, sleep, but it's energy and your ability to produce energy. So, it's no secret now, especially in the Western world, anxiety, depression rates, mental health, tattoos, self-harming, all of these types of behaviors and conditions are on the rise. And I strongly suspect it's an energy issue as well.
You said tattoos.
Tattoos, yeah. Not necessarily, but in some situations where people are heavily tattooed, it can often be a sign of stimulation and an issue with energy production at a very, very subtle level.
Really?
Yeah, and most people are tired in this day and age, right? Most people are tired, and we struggle. And it's no coincidence that a lot of the things that we value in society, like our smartphones, media, food, sex, drugs, all these things are all very stimulatory that help whip us, or help whip a weakened HPA system, a weakened nervous system. They all act as to essentially give us energy. Like even our phones, when we're scrolling, we are releasing several different neurotransmitters, including adrenaline. What people don't know, I don't know if you guys know, adrenaline is a neurotransmitter, works in the brain. And when we're scrolling and we're getting a hit or watching porn or whatever it is, our systems are getting stimulation, and that's whipping the adrenals. You're releasing adrenaline, releasing cortisol, and you're feeling energized again.
So how would you go about producing the energy then?
By the things that I mentioned, by correcting that autonomic imbalance. So you have, this is a huge generalization, please forgive me, Nicholas Gonzalez's team, but in essence, you have the sympathetic dominance, and these are also known as fast oxidizers. So these are people, if I use the analogy of a bike, so these are people who are pedaling really, really hard in a really high gear. Their body is producing energy very efficiently, but almost too quickly. So they're getting huge pulses of energy very quickly. The parasympathetics are like cycling on a very low gear and really struggling to manufacture energy efficiently. And sorry, I've lost track of what was the question?
How do you go about producing the energy?
So as I mentioned, by correcting the nervous system through the diet, either through eating more protein, less protein, more cooked vegetables, less cooked vegetables, you can correct that imbalance. And using supplements, you can correct that speed or that rate at which energy is produced in the cells.
I think it's really interesting, and I think it's fascinating when you say like people almost like whipping themselves for stimulation, because people are so drawn out, like overworked, burnt out, and they're just looking for that thing to just keep them energized.
Exactly.
Right? Do you think then just overall we're a society that just needs to reevaluate what we're eating, what we're doing, like from the patients that you see? You're just like, oh my God, there's like an epidemic of what's going on right now.
Oh, no doubt about it. Hugely. I mean, I've never seen in the 6-7 years I've been practicing, I've never seen more kids with ADHD and adults with ADHD, more kids with autism, more adults with mental health issues. Absolutely. It's just, it is. And it's very sad. I'll be honest though, I see a lot of very chronically ill, very sick people who haven't worked for 5 years and have been sitting in bed. So it's difficult to apply everything I'm saying to the whole of society, but absolutely, I think society has really messed up a lot of things. But it's a double whammy where, like I mentioned, people are struggling with energy, and therefore they consume the junk foods, the smartphones, the media, whatever it is, to try and keep themselves going, and they feed each other. And like anything with self-improvement, people often find themselves in this negative cycle, and it's all about trying to break that cycle and remove themselves from all these things and start again.
Sure.
So absolutely, as I mentioned, in an ideal world, yes, people need to step back and remove themselves from a lot of the noise and the toxic shit that's out there. That doesn't make them wealthier, it doesn't make them happier, it doesn't make them healthier. 100%.
Obviously, you having CFS in your early 20s, which had a huge effect on your mood, obviously, and there's that famous saying of we are what we eat, right? So food directly linked with mental health and performance. How much does food have an impact on your mental health overall?
So if we were having this conversation 5, 6, 7 years ago and I said it has a huge impact, you would have laughed me out the room. But things are changing now, and there is evidence to suggest that there is a significant link between food and mood. So without getting too technical or boring, for a long time it was considered that the brain, so I talk about the brain a lot, the brain was this separate entity that was just connected to all the organs. It had no real connection in terms of organs didn't affect the brain just told organs what to do. But very recently, in the last several years, we've discovered that actually there are more nerves and more signals traveling up from the gut to the brain than the brain down to the gut. And that's called the brain-gut axis. And effectively, that's important because in our guts, I think I mentioned earlier, we've got 50 trillion organisms that manufacture vitamins, neurotransmitters, regulate inflammation. So this is going to sound a bit weird, but actually for the body internally, the first exposure it has to the outside is inside the gut in terms of the immune system. So when we consume food, the immune system has to make a decision. It says either, actually, yeah, this food is fine, there's nothing nasty here, we're safe. Or it says, shit, we've got a problem and we need to tell the brain straight away. And the brain can initiate changes and the immune system can react. And that is important because if we consume junk foods, if we consume a lot of alcohol, if we've had a lot of antibiotics over a long period of time, if even we experience a huge amount of stress or even acute stress, that can change and interfere with the signaling between the gut and the brain. And effectively, you just said, you are what you eat. We are what the food that we eat affects what we think, no doubt about it, because when we consume food, it's information. Food is information, and it affects everything in the gut and the immune system, which in turn affects the brain. There is a huge relationship, huge connection. And again, I'm a little bit ahead of my time. Without sounding arrogant, I don't want to sound cocky, but a lot of what I say is still quite niche, but it's really going to come out over the next few years. For a long time, there's been focus on the gut-brain axis, but actually there's a huge connection between the gut, the brain, the immune system, and the liver. Those four work really, really intimately together. So again, to answer your question, food has a huge impact because it interferes with the signaling between the brain and the gut.
This is so fascinating, but I was just wondering, what are your thoughts on fasting?
What are my thoughts on fasting? So coincidentally, when I was just before I developed CFS, and I was reminded of this the other day because I was treating a patient who used to be my boss when I was an intern, and she remembered, one thing she remembered about me was that I used to fast a lot. I would fast and then I would train in the evening, just with I'd have one snack, like a banana, before I trained. It was madness thinking about it. In essence, my view is this: fasting in theory is fantastic for type 2 diabetes, for overweight, for heart disease. And by fasting, I'm talking about intermittent fasting.
Intermittent.
Or alternate day fasting.
What is alternate day fasting?
Where you just one day eat normally, one day don't eat anything.
Okay.
Kind of thing.
Okay.
Whereas intermittent fasting is sort of
16 hours
5-2 diet kind of
yeah.
thing, 5-2 diet. So alternate day fasting, intermittent fasting can be a very helpful tool. However, again, in the context of living in the modern world, I think it has the ability to be a stressor on the system. And actually, there was a paper that came out recently that suggested that people who fasted like an alternate day or intermittent fasting had an increased risk of sudden cardiac events. It came out just before Christmas, I think. And I remember everyone really getting their knickers in a twist because it was like the first piece of evidence that contradicted what a lot of people say about fasting. So it can be a useful tool. However, it's a stressor it can be a big stressor for people because when you're not consuming food, your adrenal glands play an important role in releasing cortisol to regulate your blood sugar. Mm-hmm. And if you're not careful, if you're someone who already is prone to anxiety and stress and being angsty, your cortisol levels will be quite high anyway. And you're just going to increase your cortisol levels even higher when you're fasting because you have to naturally increase cortisol to raise your blood sugar, to balance to manage your blood sugar. And that is extremely corrosive to the body. That can increase your risk of diabetes, coincidentally. That can increase your risk of weight gain. That can increase your risk of brain fog and dementias and things like that if you're older aged. And it can, as this paper demonstrated, it can increase your risk of sudden cardiac events as well. So I'm not the biggest fan of fasting in general. What I do recommend, you just touched on it, time-restricted feeding, where you shorten your eating window. Mm-hmm. So, for example, have dinner at 7 p.m. and then eat your first meal at 12. Mm-hmm. For example, that can have similar effects.
What are your thoughts on like 3-day fasting and longer? Just water fast, sorry.
Well, it's the same thing as alternate fasting
fasting.
or intermittent fasting. Well, I mean, that's even worse. Yeah, it can be even worse, I'm afraid. There are some people, like you guys are pretty young, you guys will be fine. But if, for example, you struggle with general fatigue issues or type 2 diabetes or heart disease or pregnancy, or you're on certain medication, avoid it. It's a hindrance, not a help.
Fascinating.
It's I'm really blown away. Carnivore diet, vegan diet. I think that you mentioned that you tried both, and I just wanted to hear from you, like your story on trying both those diets, which you found was better, and potentially what your conclusion was on trying those.
Well, I must emphasize, I did the paleo diet.
Okay, fine.
The carnivore diet is exclusively animal protein.
Okay.
At least from my experience with meeting carnivore people.
So this is just like just steak and stuff.
Yeah, and a lot of it's raw. Most of it's raw.
Really?
Oh, is it?
Yeah, literally.
Like steak, eggs, cheese? No.
Yeah.
Butter as well, though.
You know, that's a good point. You know, very little dairy. I don't think even much dairy. Some of the hardcore guys are literally just raw meat.
Oh, wow.
Red meat, organs, liver, and raw heart, all that stuff. So I've never done that. In general, I would love to say that people should have meat 2 or 3 times a week, and it should be like a treat. It should be very nourishing. But in my experience in the modern world, our systems need more amino acids than they have probably ever done, because of the stresses in the environment, the fact that we want to be exercising. Or, you know, I just saw someone running down the street, you know, in central London, next to cars emitting loads of crap. It doesn't make any sense to me, but people running in pollution. Unfortunately, we do need animal proteins quite regularly at the moment to help facilitate detoxification, to help support muscle mass, to help repair all the damage that we face. I mean, meat is not perfect as well. Meat, we inherit a lot of toxins from meat as well. So in an ideal world, I'd like to say that, you know, it would be vegetarian is better. But my current view is that actually a nutrient-dense whole foods diet with a little bit of meat is essential for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And the majority of people.
Sure.
Is there a difference between eating like red meat and then chicken, or like white meat, if you can call it? Like, which one is better, or is just the same thing?
No, so there are big differences. So red meat is far richer because it's red and you've got huge amounts of myoglobin, hemoglobin. Red meat is far richer in B vitamins, in B12, in iron. It's also far more stimulating for the nervous system versus chicken. In general, you know, if you had to choose, I'd probably say red meat is more nutrient dense.
It's better.
Yeah, but I think a variety of meats is important. You know, one thing we don't eat much of in the UK is venison, for example, or wild rabbit. We've got so many of these beautiful wild animals in the UK that we don't really eat.
And what about fish? What does fish comes into that?
I'm conflicted because I'm a huge sushi lover. Strictly with my nutrition cap on, if you want to optimize your health and nervous system, avoid anything smaller than a salmon. Sorry, consume everything smaller than a salmon and avoid anything bigger than a salmon.
Wow.
So what does that mean? That means sardines, that means mackerel, that means anchovies, herring, and wild salmon. Salmon's got problems as well at the moment. And maybe some white cod, if so, like North Atlantic caught cod is fine. But anything beyond that, you are potentially consuming more environmental crap.
Why is because they just naturally eat more stuff?
Because they're larger fish, because they're predators. Yeah, they just consume. Yeah, exactly. They're eating more. Some argue though actually we absorb more environmental toxins through vegetables than through fish. But in my experience working with kids with autism and ADHD, I noticed the moment they start introducing the more exotic fish, you know, like yellowtail and octopus, and help me out, what are some other halibut and those kind of fish, you start seeing symptoms quick back. And some people are more sensitive than others. But so in an ideal world, yeah, just avoid everything larger than a salmon. But occasional treats are fine. It's just a fun little fact, just fun, because like you're a chef.
Yeah.
Or you work
in hospitality, yeah.
So Nobu, Nobu, the Japanese chef, he's really big into his alternate health. And actually he was one of the first to say, like, Japanese fermented foods like soy are quite, not toxic, I don't like using that word, but are irritating to the stomach, shall we say. And he also knows about the environmental toxins in fish. So he partnered up with a guy called Chris Shade, who's head of a lab or of a company called Quicksilver Scientific, who developed a mercury test, the world's first, gold standard mercury test. And anyway, he created a product with Nobu, which is like a little binder, it's a little like pod that you pop before you eat the sushi. And the theory is that will bind to a lot of the crap in the fish.
No way.
Wow.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. So,
sort of moving from, I suppose, like fish to alcohol, because obviously alcohol is a huge consumption in the UK. And what would you recommend? So let's say, because a lot of what you're explaining, I feel, is like sort of like Mediterranean diet. You've got like prawns, crustaceans, a little bit of red meat, predominantly like vegetables, similar to like sort of maybe Japanese food. And those have got really high rates of, like we were saying on the podcast, like blue zones where, age in those age groups specifically more higher. What are your just general thoughts on alcohol consumption? Is that something that we should completely remove, or can we have a healthy balance with it?
I must emphasize that when I started in this line of work, I was quite avoid all junk food, avoid all alcohol, avoid all gluten, etc. at all costs. But I think, like in life in general, the truth is a lot more 50 shades of grey and nuanced. And the reason why I'm kind of hesitating is because I'm thinking of alcoholics, for example, who drink huge amounts of units.
Yeah.
But a lot of them are highly functioning people who do great things in the world. My general advice is, if you can, avoid the more complex, the alcohols that contain a lot more complex molecules. So things like the beers and the tequilas and the gins. If you can, try and stick to cleaner spirits like vodka. I have now included tequila in the vodka brand in the vodka box because I like tequila now. But tequila also has a lot of complex molecules, and it's because, in essence, for example, when you brew beer, you've got 100 to 1,000 different molecules in there. You've got lots of different flavor molecules. You've got proteins in there. It's a complex mixture of molecules. And when you drink beer, for example, or gin, your system is having to process and break that down. And a lot of them penetrate the brain as well. If you're very sensitive, the body has a hard time clearing all those out. Whereas when you consume vodka, for example, it's literally just two molecules. It's H2O and ethanol. That's it. And the body is far more simple. It is literally cleaner for the body.
Red wine, white wine, fermented.
Sorry, I forget.
Yeah.
They group into the complex
More
molecules as well.
Molecules, yeah.
But if you have a choice, probably I'd say red wine.
Yeah,
red wine, a glass a day. I mean, there's a huge talk about resveratrol. Red wine's. You often hear from wine drinkers like, "Oh, this is good for me. I'll have a bottle tonight."
Yeah.
But you got to drink 10 liters of it to get a really good level of to get a good level of resveratrol in your system. So I wouldn't worry too much.
How do you think commuting long hours impacts overall well-being? Are there lifestyle habits that, combined with nutrition, can enhance mental well-being?
I think, just even from personal experience, commuting is a massive drain of energy. We all know that.
Yeah.
And it's partly because we are under threat. Like literally our nervous systems are perceiving lots of unknown threats from the people. We don't know, when we're crammed on a train, just the length of the journey, having to get up early. So commuting is hugely, corroding and deleterious to your health, I personally think, especially on the tubes. I remember when I was commuting, like in 2013 on the tubes, someone told me just spending like 15 minutes underground is equivalent to smoking a couple cigarettes.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Because I take the Northern Line to work every day. You know,
I used to take Northern Line as well. Yeah.
and that is your cram like this.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's not a way to start my day. You know,
No.
or finish my day even. I feel it's single-handedly like the worst part.
100%. So yeah, obviously commuting comes in different forms. You know, ideally, you stay overground in a car or in a bus. I think it's not as bad. But yeah, it's more about what we're breathing in on the underground is hugely problematic.
Just carbon dioxide being locked in a tube, essentially.
Well, I'm talking about literally the dust, the microdust particles. So
Yeah.
when I did my MSc, I was working with somebody who was investigating the links between pollution levels and mental health issues and brain issues in general. And the data was quite significant, where basically the higher numbers or the greater exposure you have to these things called microdust particles. So these are like the rubber particles from cars. These are carbon particles, just known as all the little tiny particles that are emitted from a combustion engine that we breathe into our lungs.
Hey guys, your feedback is very important. And no, this is not an advertisement. Actually, what I'm asking from you is to leave a comment below what you liked and most importantly, what you disliked about this episode, because we can improve on the next episodes and we can make a better content for you to listen. Give us also a topics you'd like to us talking about, and we can prepare, do your research and talk about it on the next episodes. Thank you.
You have a significant impact, 30-40% increased risk of mental health issues and other things as well. And the same goes on the tube and the underground, because if you look ever, when you're waiting for a train, just look down at the tracks and you see all that black stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
All of that is being circulated around all the time. It's Victorian age, it was built in Victorian times. So yeah, you're breathing all of that stuff in. And there was a great mask, and I was just trying to remember the name of it. I used to visit an ex, or let me rephrase that. I visited an ex once in India, and she insisted on going on those tuk-tuks and the scooters, and it was a very particular mask. I'm sure they were on Dragon's Den, and you look like Bane from Batman.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and it's got like 3 or 4 different filters, and it looks really ugly, but it filters everything out.
Oh wow.
I would recommend wearing one of those when you're on the tube.
Okay. Yeah, because it's almost like you wear a mask now and people are like...
Yeah, oh, you still believe that shit?
Yeah, I know, yeah.
Yeah, because it's all about COVID now, right?
Yeah. But it's not about infection, it's about...
Yeah. No, of course.
Yeah.
Which accelerate aging as well, because the lungs have to filter all of that out. The immune system doesn't just look for bacteria, it looks for any foreign particle that it can gobble up.
Mm-hmm.
So your immune system is having to work harder. It's part of the reason why when you go into London or you have a night out, you feel really, really tired. Because your immune system is just preoccupied gobbling up all the crap you've just ingested.
I do feel that way especially now that I live in Manchester. Every time I'm coming back from London, I feel fatigued.
Yeah.
But I thought maybe it's just because of the travels and because I have to go from Manchester to London and back. So I thought maybe it's that.
As well.
Yeah.
But it's because your system is preoccupied with processing all the rubbish.
I do feel a lot stressed in London as well. That's for sure. Like this morning, I was walking on the street, and the ambulance would just literally turn the alarm next to me, and I just got shocked.
Yeah.
I just hate that shit.
It's almost like it's sensory overload. You're assessing all these dangers that like you were saying, so your body's already sort of in a stress state. You're then breathing in toxins. You're then going to a restaurant or eating something that's not great, and you're doing that over an extended period of time. So I mean, I've been living in London now for the last 7.5 years. Whenever I go back to Oxford, where I'm from, and I go and stay with my mum or something, I just pass out because I'm like,
So calm, right?
yeah, and I just try and lower. And I always say this as well. When I enter London from Oxford, I feel the vibrational state in my body just starting to increase. You can actually feel that. And I think that when you have densely populated areas like cities, you can feel everyone else's energy. I think the body gets an energy or a frequency, and I think you can pick up just on so many different things, like dangers, people's moods, all of these moving parts underground above you, all these different networks, connections, Wi-Fi signals. I think it's not a sustainable place for an extended period of time.
100%. It's really interesting you say that, because I'm just reminded of speaking to someone who used to be from India.
Yeah.
Obviously lived in India and then moved to Dubai, and then moved to the UK. And he said, ever since he's moved here, he's never felt more fatigued and lethargic. And like, obviously, India is a busy place and Dubai is quite bustling. And it's just, it's really interesting. I keep hearing the same thing. People, like even when I visited India, obviously I was on holiday, so I wasn't worrying about work. But obviously, on the Indian road, you're just being bombarded everywhere. But you just don't feel that same sensation of like being depleted. And I don't know what that is.
When I went to Thailand in the 2022, I think that was, I went there only for 6 weeks for holiday. And
Only?
Well, because the second time when I went there, I went for like 6 months. So.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So when I came back to London, I remember I took a tube from Heathrow, and I got out in, was it Brixton or somewhere? I don't remember, but I was walking and I just noticed that my walk pace became faster. Like I started to walk faster. I was like, and I think that was the first time I realized that this is how I live every single day in London. But just because I was in Thailand, I was a lot more relaxed, a lot slower. But now, as soon as I came back into the same environment, I just follow what everyone does, like without even completely subconsciously. So that was a big realization. I was like, I don't think I want to stay in London for like a longer time, and now I live in Manchester. So
Yeah, no, you did the right thing. I always said the future of the UK was in the north, because I think a lot of people are going to figure out that actually, the air quality is really bad, value for money is really bad. I'm going to go up, and I think COVID accelerated.
Yeah,
it a little
exactly.
bit
Yeah,
better. No one's perfect, but
I mean, a lot of people now moving up north as well. So
yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I always say, I don't want to sound cynical or pessimistic, but I always say the UK is a depressant. It's a major, well, not the UK, but London is certainly a major depressant in many respects.
Well, you have the whole UK, and then you have London,
Yeah,
which is
exactly.
completely different from the rest of the country.
But
So
yeah,
you were living in London for a bit.
I was,
Yeah, and when did you move out?
back when so a long time ago. So I've been out of London for the last 9 years, something like that.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
So how often do you go to your clinic? Because it's in Tooting, right?
Yeah, so that's very new. So that's only in the last 3 weeks. But my main clinic's in Windsor. Still in Windsor,
okay.
But only
Okay.
recently I've started coming to this
Okay.
part of town again.
I think there's I just want to touch, because I think there is a bit more of a shift towards healthier lifestyles. At least I see on like socials. Like there was one specific guy that blew up on social media where he was like actually like reversing his aging, and I know that's just like one
Brian Johnson.
I know that's like one extreme case, but he said something that was really interesting, which was like he was saying that if the one thing that people can do immediately now that would benefit them just across the board was like sleep. And he treats sleep like it's, sacred, yeah. And one of those things is like he removes his phone out of the room, or like he'll have like an alarm clock, so it like reduces the signals, things like that. Is there anything in terms of like sleep or getting ready for bed, or not eating a certain amount of hours before bed that you would recommend someone?
Yeah, 100%. Just before I answer that question, I think there is something that needs to be emphasized in that to be able to achieve efficient sleep, you need to be healthy. And I think recently a lot of people have been kind of giving the impression that a lot of people are not sleeping well because they've just got into bad habits. I think that's definitely true, but there is a portion of people, probably 20-30% of people, who actually are not sleeping properly because their systems are not functioning optimally. So the first thing I would say is just address any underlying issues there, whether it's chronic viral bug or detoxification issue or hormonal issue. There are many different causes of that. But CFS actually is a great example of how a condition or dysfunction in the body can reduce the ability to achieve good sleep. So I'll just leave that one there. But in terms of practical things, so the research shows regularity. You need to stay consistent, even on weekends or even on holiday. Any change in environment, sleep time needs to be consistent. Darkness, we need to fall in love with darkness again. I think one thing I found helps a lot of clients is just turning 50% of the lights off about an hour or two before bed. Even you watch the TV, that's fine, but just turn the lights off. That can be really helpful. Thirdly, only use your bed for sleep and sex, nothing else. A lot of people get into bed, read a book, have a chat. The body is or the brain is an association machine. So just associate the bed with sleeping and sex, just those two activities. The next thing would be, if you don't sleep, wake up and go for a walk. If you don't go to sleep for about 10 minutes or so, 10, 15 minutes, go for a walk, go downstairs.
Really? Why is that?
For that reason, that the brain is an association machine, and it's very easy to get into a cycle where you're not falling asleep, you start daydreaming, you start winding yourself up, you start developing sleep anxiety.
But then by going for a walk, would
when I say go for a walk, I don't mean like going outside and walking. Just
okay,
wander around the house or the flat or whatever.
Okay, for like 10 minutes or so.
Yeah. Just lie down,
Interesting.
even just read a book if you like for a few lines, or and in my experience, and this is the heavy hitting one, there is loads of data to suggest that meditation is one of the best ways to achieve optimal sleep. It's very hard to do, obviously, but meditation, if you can do it just 10, 15 minutes before bed. I like to do it before, I just sit on the sort of the, on the floor with my back against the bed, and I just meditate for 10, 15 minutes to the point where I'm literally just about to fall asleep.
Really?
Would you meditate in the bed, or that has to be outside the bed?
No, I said outside of the bed. So that's why I sit on the floor with my back against the bed.
Okay. But is that for that specific reason that you only sleep in a bed?
Correct.
Okay.
So I have like a zero gravity chair now in my bedroom that I sit in. So I'll play on my iPad, whatever. I'll be on the phone. I'll do whatever. I'll do everything on that chair, and then I'll go to bed to sleep.
Interesting.
Do you have like a night routine before you go to bed? Is that sort of like you were saying, turning off the lights, having the meditation? Is there anything else that you do before getting in?
I'll tell you my theoretical routine.
Yeah.
What I'd like to do is something that doesn't happen often. Yeah. What do I like to do? So basically, no commotion, nothing off. About an hour and a half before bed, nothing. I don't need to wash the dishes, don't need to talk to anyone. That is my time from 8:30 onwards. So I try to go to bed at 10. 8:30, so an hour and a half before bed, I make that sacred zone. Don't talk to me, don't touch me, leave me alone. Go upstairs, brush my teeth. Then I'll often just read something, like a couple pages. Then I'll meditate. Actually first I do alternate nostril breathing for about 10 minutes. That really tones down the parasympathetic system.
Just to touch on the nostril breathing, is there a specific technique you do?
So essentially, you close one nostril, breathe in through the open nostril, hold for 5 seconds, open the closed nostril, close the open nostril, and then breathe out.
And what does it do?
It activates or switches on the parasympathetic system, and it helps tone down the sympathetic system. Breath work is a big thing.
Yeah.
Although I will say I have recently swapped the nostril breathing for something called tap and toning. Don't know if you've
I've heard of tap and toning.
No,
have you? Okay.
I haven't heard it.
It's awesome. So there is a nerve that travels from the voice box
That's it.
into the vagus nerve. So when we tone, so you have humming, like toning is just humming with your mouth open, like that. And that stimulates the nerve, which sends a signal back to the vagus nerve and up through a parasympathetic pathway. And that brings the parasympathetic system down. Tapping is a little bit more woo-woo, but the theory is that it tones down the sympathetic system. So you're getting a double whammy. And it's quite fun, and it just makes you laugh even if it's not doing anything directly. It makes you laugh, and that relaxes you. So I actually just tap and tone now for about 2 or 3 minutes. Just like, like that. And that actually is enough as well. And then I'll meditate.
And then when you're doing the nostril breathing, are you doing that over a sort of a period of 1 to
10 minutes.
10 minutes.
10 minutes.
Really?
Yeah, that's why because the nostril breathing, sometimes I just can't be bothered to do it.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Whereas the toning is just quite...
2 to 3 minutes get you into that parasympathetic
Parasympathetic,
state. Meditate, and then off to bed.
Exactly.
Morning, are you looking at, because there's so many theories of like getting sunlight in your eyes, drinking water, things like having salt or lemon in the first thing in the morning to sort of start that system.
I have quite a simple approach, just some warm water first thing in the morning to start the day, because it's like anything that the stomach is how can I say, it's like if you imagine a sack, right?
Yeah.
And in the morning it's kind of like dry. I mean, okay, you've got secretions, but it's kind of dry. I like to just have some water to warm the gut, to warm the stomach up, lubricate everything, and I find that works quite well, and it also stimulates my bowels as well first.
Right.
I find that useful.
Are you eating sort of first thing when you're looking at nutrition in the morning to think of breakfast? Because they say that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Things like that.
I'll be honest with you. I probably should be, because I end up, if I don't eat breakfast, I won't eat till about 12 o'clock, which means I'll only ever have 2 meals in the day, which is not good for me because I need more calories. But yeah, when I'm busy, that's my routine. But yes, ideally, having breakfast is important, especially if you've got things like, if you've got certain gut issues, like if you've got low stomach acid, for example, or adrenal problems, eating first thing can be quite useful.
Sorry, I know that we're sort of coming off of these questions a little bit, but when I think of breakfast, you immediately think of cereal, Weetabix, eggs, bacon, and all these sort of, I suppose,
breakfasty
foods that are great, all good for you, like cereal being so high in sugar, like you say, and coming out of a box, but then for those having a vegetarian or a diet, would you say that then having cooked broccoli in the morning is the best thing to eat?
Well, absolutely. So I had a huge sweet tooth, and basically now I don't eat any cereals anymore. I have a savory breakfast. So typical breakfast for me would be like a tin of mackerel or a tin of sardines with steamed parsnips or carrots with the greens that I mentioned, leeks and cabbage, for example.
Yeah.
So absolutely, yeah. There's no reason why not. Many parts of the world have savory breakfast.
Yeah.
True. Would you put salt on your vegetables? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, yeah. Salt, sometimes cider vinegar and olive oil.
Yeah.
So it's really simple. Like,
it's a very simple way to eat.
Yeah.
Definitely. Doesn't mean I don't crave something a bit oomphy. Yeah, I love Thai food.
Yeah. Definitely. I think even when I went to Thailand as well, like some of the savoury breakfast that you'd have there, like morning glory, which was like vegetables with like garlic, and, all those, or like even like certain chili oils or things like that. Really great.
It's delicious.
Yeah.
And most people can just have their leftover dinner for breakfast.
That's actually a really good point. For sure.
I wanted to touch on supplements.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on supplements, and is there any specific supplement that you would just take? Like if there would be one supplement, what would you take?
Yeah, so people love supplements, I think, because it's just an easy win. It's cool. It makes people feel like they're getting something really special, super duper. I think, as I've mentioned a few times now, living in this modern world, we need to make certain provisions to try and help us live in this modern world, and I think supplements are one of them. I see supplements as dynamic things that maybe only need to be taken like a couple months and then off for a few months. Vitamin D is very trendy.
Vitamin D, yeah.
I think, vitamin D is very useful. I think having low levels of vitamin D cause more of a problem than, or let me rephrase that, sorry. Low vitamin D is not the cause of a disease, but having a low vitamin D level can increase your risk of having a disease, and I think people get a bit mixed up with that. So if I had one supplement to recommend, it would be the fatty acids, actually. It would be consuming a very specific formula that contains the raw, unadulterated forms of omega-6 and omega-3. So this is a very carefully extracted mixture of rapeseed, sunflower, I think there's a bit of flaxseed in there, a little bit of coconut, to help, as I mentioned, to repair those cell membranes, to support the system, and they're also an antidote to eating out as well,
Mm.
to those vegetable oils. So I'd be consuming those probably for 3 months, and then just using them ad hoc. So when you eat out, for example, just pop 2 or 3. That I think is potentially a lifelong supplement.
So go on to a cycle for about 3 months daily, and then you can start looking at those, taking them before meals.
Yes.
Are there any specific brands or details that you look for when you look at omega-3s and omega-6? Because you can get different strengths.
Yes, you just touched on something that I realised I didn't explain, which was fish oils
Fish oils,
themselves and why
yeah.
they're a problem.
Okay.
So, I mean, if I asked you, I'm sure 7 Cs, you would probably...
Yeah.
Fish oil's great, right?
Yeah.
They're everywhere, and they're good for us, and they're anti-inflammatory, and they're good for joints, and blah, blah, blah. As I mentioned, the omega-6 molecule is God's molecule, because it has this perfect balance of the number of double bonds. The fish oil molecules, which are these long-chain derivative forms of omega-3, not 6, are super long chain and contain multiple double bonds. So the more double bonds you have, the more risk of damage from heat and oxygen. And fish oil potentially provides huge numbers of these long chains into the cell membrane, when only we need the shorter chain with a couple, 2 or 3 double bonds. So once again, that's fine. There's redundancy in the system where we can shunt these DHA and EPA molecules into the cell membrane, but then the immune system and the antioxidant system has to lend more antioxidants and repair that damage. So fish oil to supplement with fish oil is a no-no for the vast majority of people. There are exceptions: pregnancy, anorexics, vegetarians. There are exceptions. And I've forgotten your question.
Well, so you'd rather take omega-6 than omega-3. Are there any specific requirements of omega-6 that you would recommend for people to take? Or is it just
specific, like brands?
Can you just buy it on Amazon?
Oh, I see. So no.
Yeah.
So at the moment, it's so you can buy a few different brands, but most of the brands only contain one type of source. So it's like sunflower oil, for example. But there's only one factory in the world that can manufacture these oils or extract the oils without damaging them, because they're very sensitive to light, very sensitive to temperature, as I mentioned. And that's in Vegas. And this company is called Yes. Coincidentally, they're just called Yes, YES, and they make a product called just PEOs, parent essential oils. So that is really the only one I recommend. Body Bio do another formula, which can work as well. But yes, PEOs is my go-to.
Great. So vitamin D you can supplement, omega-6 you can supplement. Anything else?
I would say, generally vitamin D is useful, but probably not as important as the fatty acids.
Yeah.
A lot of people say magnesium as well. Magnesium is very important. It's one of the most ubiquitous nutrients in all of our biochemistry, but magnesium is also very stimulating to the parasympathetic system. So some people who supplement with magnesium can feel tired and feel much slower and lethargic. The parasympathetic guys actually need more calcium. So just be aware of that. So magnesium can be helpful as well. I'm just thinking out loud if there are any more. No, those would probably be my 3, at least at this time. If you ask me in a few years, I maybe have a different answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting because, like you see, I for one have taken a variety of different supplements, and I think as well for those that might be training a lot or exercising a lot, tend to supplement also with things like protein powders or just things that are out there on the market. From your experience, do you recommend sort of staying away from those per se, like drinking your calories? Do you recommend sort of like eating them, cooking them, seeing what you're eating?
So it absolutely depends. If you're training, it's useful. These things can be useful. If, for example, you're someone like me who's has a proneness to being slim, getting extra calories through a shake is absolutely a great way. It's very convenient. I have no objection generally to those products, creatine, for example. Yeah, so I think that's absolutely fine. Whey protein, just got to be careful. If you struggle with type 2 diabetes, whey protein could be a problem.
Yeah,
Requires more insulin
sure.
to process. But no, in general, I'm a big supporter of those products.
Are there any specific foods that are directly linked to things like Alzheimer's at all, in your opinion?
Yes. So where to even start? That's a huge topic.
Yes.
No, it's okay.
I'm opening up a box here.
Yeah, no, it's good. So to be honest with you, in terms of preventing Alzheimer's, dementias of all kinds, MS, Parkinson's, what we've talked about so far, covering those basics, getting the vegetables right, balancing the autonomic nervous system, getting your fats right, those three things in themselves are extremely neuroprotective. The nervous system is probably the most sensitive, most fragile system in the body. Although it's arguably the most powerful, it is the most sensitive. And there's a huge amount of fat. Partially it's because there's a huge amount of fat in the nervous system. And they are very, very sensitive to damage, oxidative stress as well. So consuming the vegetables, correcting the fats, help the neurons repair and support this thing called plasticity, which allows the brain to learn, to adapt and get stronger. There have been some studies looking at Alzheimer's. Forgive me for the name, the Mediterranean DASH diet, which is essentially a modification of the Mediterranean diet, but with a greater emphasis on berries, red meat, avoiding butter and margarine. Interestingly, that was the other emphasis. Showed a risk reduction, definitely a significant risk reduction in Alzheimer's. But it's the multiplicity of factors. It's not just diet.
Exactly.
Yes.
It's the stress. It's the environmental toxins. It's infection, the trauma, all that stuff.
I know that you sort of touched on this when you spoke about sort of the nutritional values in vegetables in comparison to fruits. However, berries do have huge advantages to cognitive and brain function.
Yeah, they can.
Are there any specific berries that you would recommend?
Super simple, just organic blueberries and raspberries.
Yeah.
Super simple. Wild blueberries if you can get them. Wild strawberries if you can get them. That's it really. As simple as that. Generally, the smaller the fruit, the better.
Okay.
Yeah, generally. And acai berries actually. I'm a big fan of acai berry. Yeah.
Okay. It sounds like, it's when you think about foods like smaller than a salmon, smaller berries, fruits. I kind of think about like, if I was a caveman or if I was walking through my environment, those would be the foods that I would have access to just with my hands.
Yeah, exactly.
So really, if I think about like the
Makes
human
sense, yeah.
bare minimum, and like kind of assessing my environment of where I can get those foods from, it doesn't seem like I need to go out to the middle of the ocean and catch these big fish, or I need to go and take out like a big shark or can't, like, do you know what I mean? It all seems very much like within my reach.
Exactly.
And I guess with foods being more accessible than like ever today, it's not a huge amount of change that people can implement.
Definitely. And the one thing I would just say to that is it's often an addition. What I like to say is healthy behaviors and healthy change is actually more about adding something rather than taking away.
Yeah.
So like, fine, you've got to be realistic. People are going to have their Uber Eats and they are going to eat out for work or whatever.
Of course.
But just add, order a side of vegetables,
Yeah.
steam, I steam like 2 days worth of vegetables and then just keep them in the fridge.
Steaming being a better option. Like
Probably gold standard. Yeah, some people like pressure cooking, like Instapots. I don't know. Is it Instapots?
Yeah.
Insta cookers?
Yeah.
But the minimum setting is like 1 minute. So by the time it gets up to pressure, cooks for 1 minute, they're completely overcooked.
Yeah, sure. So you just have like a vegetable steamer and that be a way that, okay.
Exactly.
Great.
Just to quickly touch on the breakfast side of things. So how soon do you eat after waking up? Is there like a time limit is it like after an hour or as soon as you wake up? Because you said if you don't eat up until 12?
Correct.
Yeah.
Generally, within half an hour of waking is
within
probably
half an hour.
is a good rule. Yeah, within half an hour, especially if you've got energy problems, if you've got issues with your adrenals or thyroid. Eating helps stimulate the release of those hormones, and it helps because there's a very intimate link with the hormone production and the biological, the circadian rhythms as well.
Mm.
So eating early kind of helps realign those rhythms.
Going to bed as well, sort of eating, I guess you don't want to be digesting while you're sleeping because that could interrupt your sort of
Yeah, sorry, I
sleep.
didn't answer that. Absolutely. So it varies, you know. It's like some people can do well on eating just maybe 2 hours before bed.
Yeah.
But there are some people who need a snack before bed,
Mm.
and I think that's fine as long as it's nothing too
Heavy.
like rich or heavy. Yeah, like
Yeah.
like a Mars bar ice cream or something. Probably not, but definitely like, I don't know, some yogurt with blueberries and some flax is
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny, my grandfather being one of them has a coffee before bed.
I know that generation. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've heard that before.
Yeah, and
Whiskey.
like,
My mum still drinks coffee before bed.
Yeah.
Like, not all the time, but very
Yeah,
often.
yeah, I've got friends who do that.
It's-
Well, those people, I mean, you can tell us.
Yeah.
In my experience, these types of people are very well balanced. They've got good energy.
Yeah.
They sleep well because they're healthy. They achieve good sleep.
Mm.
And coffee should never give you a big buzz. It should just be a very, very gentle lift.
Mm.
I wanted to ask, so like, if we have family members who, like, we know that they're not really eating well, or like they're not really looking after their health, and we want to come up from empathetic side of instead of like you should do this or that, how would you go about recommending them to changing the diets or the lifestyle, you could call it?
I've learnt through hard experience that we have no control over anyone.
Yeah.
All we can do is just be the change that we want to see. And I can verify this with real experience. So for a long time, when I changed my diet, my dad, being quite old-fashioned, was like, what are you doing? Why are you eating all these vegetables? Why can't you eat normally? That's what
Normally.
Yeah, why can't you eat like a normal person?
Yeah.
Just be a normal person. And I was like, yeah, whatever. But he would be like this for a few months, few years. Probably not a year, but a few months. And then all of a sudden, he'd be like, oh, actually, I'll have some broccoli as well. And then my mum started doing it with me. She went gluten-free, dairy-free, and started eating vegetables as well. And my dad would start seeing that. And he'd be like, oh, I want some vegetables. Oh, what are you making? Oh, we're making a gluten-free, whatever, fish pie, dairy-free fish pie. Oh, I'll have that too. And over the months, people start...
Just
that
be an
message
example.
starts imbuing, yeah, absolutely. So my advice would be just to be the change that you want to see. Stay true to you. And if they want to follow, great. If not, good luck to them.
Mm. Again,
So-
sorry.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Question about gluten as well. Are you cutting out sort of refined carbohydrates? So things like pastas, breads. Obviously, that's such like a wildly consumed food.
Yeah.
Would you recommend sort of having, again, just a healthy relationship with it? Could you recommend that into diet?
My rule is, if you tolerate it and if you're honest with yourself, if you don't get brain fog, if you don't break out in acne, if you don't get bloating, if you genuinely feel nourished and energized by that food, eat it. It's absolutely fine. But if you tick any of the boxes I've just described, maybe cut it out or reduce it, or address the issue that's causing that sensitivity,
Yeah.
would be my advice.
I mean, every time I eat a bowl of pasta, I'm just like, I can't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for me,
Yeah, but then you go back to it, don't you? Then you go back for more.
and then you go back for 2 portions, 3
Yeah.
portions, and then you're like, oh my God, what have I done?
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you another question because this is just a fascination of I guess both of us as well. Going to like cognitive, so like blueberries, for example, being really good for the brain, like mushrooms as well. So I think I've seen people supplement with mushrooms. I've also started to supplement with some mushrooms like lion's mane and things like that, which have proven benefits to help with cognitive function. I just wanted to see your thoughts on things like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm really interested in brain fog, as I mentioned.
Yeah.
This is my symptoms. And I did a lot of research, and the current view is, obviously it's not clear or black and white yet, that for some reason these immune cells in the brain called microglia become irritated and red and sort of get into this red alert mode. Mushrooms potentially have the effect of like reducing that or calming the immune system down a little bit in the brain, and that alone can then pave the way for the neurons to communicate properly. So I think I'm a big I think they work. I think lion's mane especially, people have told me so many times that it really helps. Go for it. There is some research that's positive, but I must emphasize these are all just aids and crutches. Try and tackle the root cause.
Yeah.
The truth is, most of our brains contain aluminium, mercury, plastics. They're all in there, and to really clean those out, you need to go back to the steps that I described at the beginning. But once again, these are tools that can aid you. For sure.
So would you go about then answering those 100 questions, eating 8-9 vegetables per day? You said the broccoli, eating berries, red meats, variation, I guess, of them. Is there anything else you would include to just optimize your health in general? Like, after this podcast, I think I'll make a lot of changes, but I'm just wondering, what should I stick in place right now to just start feeling better in a way? The reason I'm questioning, I think, because it's really important, because when I wake up in the morning, I feel like I really struggle to get out of bed. But then throughout the day, I feel great. I don't really feel that fatigued.
Yeah.
But that first initial getting up out of bed is really, really hard for me. And I'm not sure if I'm just being lazy or I'm just not putting the right habits in place. So
from the sounds of it, just to answer that question, if you're just having issues getting out of bed, it's more of a habitual thing, things that you're doing before bed. If, however, you struggle to get going and everything is a struggle during the day, you're just not your best self, you're struggling with your memory and your focus, and you're more irritable, then those can be signs of a greater issue. But in your situation, it's more likely just those habits before you go to bed. And then just to answer your question about anything else that you can do, one thing I must emphasize is that change is a journey and not a destination.
Exactly.
It takes a lot of time and trial and error. I often get the kind of middle-aged men who will walk into the clinic and go, so my wife's told me to see you. I'm diabetic, I'm overweight, got some plaque in my arteries. Just give me like a diet plan and I'll follow it. And I just go, no, it doesn't really work like that, because you will maybe do it for a couple of days, but then the boss has a go at you or the wife has a go at you, and you then get back into your old habits. And, and you're back at square one. So what I would say is, just right now, like for anything that you can do, just add
stuff.
So add the vegetables. Make sure you're eating plenty of meat, because meat is generally quite enjoyable to eat. And start taking the PEOs. And obviously address your sleep as well.
Yeah.
Just to delve into a bit more about you, and I know that you've got your own business, and obviously starting a business, you come across so many different hurdles, and that can sometimes lead to pushing yourself, overexhaustion. And I know that in your sort of beginning of the stages, you received a lot of no's, and just from you dealing with that and having the resilience to come up against that when self-doubt creeps in, how do you push past those barriers?
Well, I'll be honest, when I started, it was because I think probably naively, like a lot of people who start businesses, they get really excited and they start reaching out to people for various things, and basically you either get ignored or just said no. You kind of go, what? This was going to be amazing. And it was really tough. I think I definitely used to cry a lot, I think on a weekly basis. Fortunately, my mum, who is in business development, she kind of just kept giving me advice, just keep going, just relax. It's going to take you a long time. So she definitely helped. But I'd also say therapy as well helped a hell of a lot, because I was taking those no's very personally, and it was affecting my self-esteem. But when I kind of reconnected with who I was and what I wanted, my self-esteem kind of rebalanced, and I addressed those causes of the low self-esteem. So once all that was addressed, my self-esteem was kind of high enough to kind of have the attitude of, this is what I do, this is who I am. If you don't like it and you're not interested, that's all right. Next. But the biggest advice, that's quite deep stuff, I would just say it takes a long time. It takes a lot of patience. Just keep going, keep going. You've got to really want it. You know, we live in a time, as great as it is, it's also very, very competitive now. There's more. I mean, every time I'm on LinkedIn, there's a bloody coach. Everyone's a coach now.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like doctors have become coaches, lawyers have become coaches. You know, it's just everywhere. But the difference between them and you is you got to keep going, and also you've got to know your edge, and you've got to really believe in yourself. That's probably the thing my mum drilled into me the most. You've got to believe in yourself.
Interesting, because our jiu-jitsu coach used to say the reason I'm a black belt is simply because I tapped more times than you did.
Oh.
So in jiu-jitsu, like, it's a grappling, and if you submit someone, they tap, and then you
Release them.
release them. So his analogy was like, I just tapped more times than you did. That's why I'm a black belt.
Yeah, 100%. But also, I there's this funny. I shouldn't be. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry, but I shouldn't be quoting Trump. But there's a great video of Trump circulating on YouTube where he introduced his son Barron when he was a baby to the world. I don't know if you've seen it.
I think I might.
I haven't seen
And he
it.
goes something along the lines to the press. He's like, "This is Barron. He's strong. He's mean. He's smart. He's a fighter, and he's going to be a huge success." And he said, "He's above all. The most important thing you need is to be smart." And I agree with that. You've also got to be smart, not just like, you know, intelligence is God given, but you've got to be smart about thinking about ways to get around a little bit. And that's one thing I've noticed. I can share stories on that if you want.
Yeah, I would love you.
Yes,
to.
please. Yeah.
So, for example, I give a lot of corporate talk. Well, at least when I started, I was giving a lot of corporate talks because I love speaking. Although this is probably the longest gig I've done, 2 hours. Is that for us? No.
No, it's fine.
No.
Yeah, so I wanted to get into corporate talking, corporate speaking, and like I said, that situation where you're reaching out to people, "Hi, I'm Inder, this is what I do, I'm so excited," either get ignored or no. And it was constantly like that. Like, even I was getting introductions through friends to the head of HR or whatever, it was still just not interested, or we're busy, we've got speakers. And I thought, fuck this. So I'd rock up at the offices with a card or something, and just try and either catch them on the way out, because I'd find them on LinkedIn, catch them on the way out, or try and get in some shape or form to get the security to call them up. For example, that's just a simple example.
Yeah.
Because people need to be in front of you.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. I feel like with the podcast as well, like, we've been doing it for a year now, and we started to think about ways to push it out a bit. So we decided with Rupert to, because the podcast itself is mainly about self-development, mental health, and we want to talk about it with just average people. So we're going to go to like Hyde Park and interview people on the street, which I think is going to be very interesting for us as well, to become better communicators. And I think the content will be a little bit different as well.
Yeah,
so.
definitely. And you got to have balls. Someone else, there's another quote. People think, I can't remember what it was now. A lot of people think success is about something, and I can't remember what that something is, but actually success is about taking risk. People think, success is about hard work and all there's that good stuff, but it's really about taking risk.
Yeah,
And I would agree with that.
totally. I think the other thing as well, and a lot from what I've learned from you, is starting a business. When I started my hospitality business, and it's really hard, but I think the moment that I started, like you were saying, like working on myself, whether that was through therapy or optimizing my nutrition or anything that allowed me to feel good, I was able to approach situations a lot better.
100%.
And I think that that's such a big part of someone like yourself that's performing at a really high level, or like believing in themselves and actually having a really good outlook on probably your overall mental health is by really just sort of going, okay, well, what can I do that's going to make me feel good and confident? And I suppose like that is working on the nutrition, working on my overall mental health. How do I feel? I think all of those things really add up. And again, probably allows you to be more creative as well in a way.
Yeah, 100%.
Gives you that extra brain power. Was there anything specific in your business where there was like a really hard hurdle that you had to overcome?
For me, one was just initially getting patients, but actually I found that quite straightforward because I love writing. So patients were coming through the website, finding me on Google. But for me, it was more just the reaching out and wanting to give talks. And at that point, they were free talks even. I wasn't even charging. And just the no's, that was the big hurdle. And also there are weeks, especially when you start out, where you're not getting no patients, no interest. And you're just like, you just feel completely worthless. And you think, God, and you will start worrying about the future. So yeah, I would say that's probably those were my biggest hurdles. But you just got to keep going. And again, advice from my mum, don't focus on the reward, just focus on the journey, just keep going. Enjoy reaching out to people, enjoy talking to people on podcasts, whatever. And then the money, the customers, that all comes later as a byproduct. Yeah. In my experience, at least.
Conrad and I always try and say, like, even building this, we're just trying to be present as much as we can by just enjoying what we do, and like the rewards will come later. I think when you spend too much time focusing on the future of things, it can then in turn feed into like a negativity or self-doubt about yourself because you're not there yet. So I think it's more about sort of just being in the moment with things.
100%. And I think in this age of AI, I think people are going to be craving more genuine human authenticity. And people want to connect with that person. Yeah. So you've got to be coming from the right place, I think.
So I just wanted to ask one.
Go for it, man.
With things like connecting with your food, I think a lot of people are so disconnected with where food comes from and what they eat. And one thing as well that I've tried to do more so is have gratitude for the food that's on my plate. And I think the intention behind having that creates a lot more of a healthy relationship with sort of getting the discipline in by eating good foods as well. So I think if you can look at food and go, wow, that's where it's come from, you know, that's part of an animal that was grown, or that's a vegetable and Mother Nature's grown that. I think instead of looking at a box or a bag, there's not a lot of gratitude to come from that.
No, definitely.
So I think if you can look at food and be grateful for what's on it, would you say sort of when you sort of took a drastic turn in your diet, you started to go, okay, am I eating food with the right intention?
100% yes. And that's a really interesting point because one of my mentors had this phrase when I was getting better that stuck with me, which is a nutrient-dense diet is a problem-facing diet.
That's really interesting.
It's a problem-facing diet.
Yeah.
And when you are, how can I say, when you're struggling and you've got mental health issues or whatever it is, and then you're only eating vegetables, which don't have the same reward value as a Mars bar or whatever, all of a sudden your brain goes, whoa, I'm not being given like the pleasure that I need. And all of a sudden you have this, you're literally confronted with problems, whatever they may be, the stress, the mortgage, whatever it is, health issues. So if you're eating a nutrient-dense diet, it 100% naturally orientates you towards the truth. At least in my experience.
I think, yeah, if it's food that's had some resilience, and it had to go through like a process of growing or, like you're saying, fighting for its life or whatever it might be.
That's a really good point, yeah.
It's a really interesting factor because I think psychologically that plays into, maybe I don't know if there's a theory of like eating food that's had to maybe like go through, situations, or let's say meat, for example, that's had to like fight for its life or whatever, or I don't know, try and get away from a predator and you're now eating that food. Does that then maybe have like a placebo effect and give you more resilience? I don't know, but
I'm not so sure about that, but I do agree we need to be more aware of where our food comes from. I actually have a saying that, slight digression, I don't think we should eat an animal that we're not willing to kill ourselves. I kind of live by that mantra. So one thing I'm trying to do is go hunting because I've never been hunting before.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I'm not completely honest with myself. Like we all know it's easy to walk into the supermarket, pick up some chicken legs.
Yeah.
I think we should all be doing that.
Just on that part, so where do you think people should get their foods from? Because I guess the supermarkets, like I'm not sure which supermarkets I should go to buy my food from. Should I go to local butchers, get my meat from, or should I just go to Lidl and buy steaks from there? Like what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, in an ideal world, you would find farms or farm shops where you know where the meat comes from, and you can talk to the butcher or the farmer and know what the animals eat, see what they what drugs they're given, etc., etc. In an ideal world, but that's not ideal. So I would say probably gold standard are farm shops. Find farms that you can, like, I love Riverford, Dalesford, the Roog Estate. It's fantastic. I don't know if you know the Roog Estate. It's in Welsh. Some of the best lamb, some of the best pork comes from Roog.
Yeah.
The Roog, sorry, I'm probably not saying it right. Roog, Rhug.
Yeah.
But in an ideal world, organic, free range. If you can, just buy organic everything. In an ideal world, to be honest with you, I'm not the world's expert on like cultivation and what the best processes are for producing plants. But what I can certainly say is, in my experience, the best quality vegetables, except for the farm shops, come from Sainsbury's.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know why.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I just think the quality of their organic veg especially is fantastic.
Where'd you go hunting, by the way?
I haven't been hunting yet. If you would like to take me hunting, I would love to go with you.
I've never been as well, but I'd really like to.
Yeah, one of my friends potentially will do it.
Oh, wow.
So
No,
if you
that's-
guys want to come along, maybe we can
I would love that.
Yeah.
see what we can do.
Yeah.
I would absolutely love that.
That'd be really
Yeah,
cool.
venison or something.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
I would love that.
Like, even when you look at cultures that like hunt animals and kill animals, and they have a really respect for the meat, and they're utilizing the entire animal, they're using the organs, all of it. I think there's so much to be said for that, 'cause it's so easy to like just look at a piece of chicken and actually don't even think of it even being a living bird.
I know, right?
And that's really sad.
Exactly.
Or like you get meat eaters that aren't willing to kill the food that they eat, and I think there's so much to be said for that process, because it gives you gratitude and respect for where it all comes from.
100%. I mean, like in France and in the Far East, chickens come with the necks and the heads
Yeah.
attached.
Yeah.
But here we don't do that. Nice.
Where people can find more about you,
So I have a website, YouTube, Instagram. Yeah, if you just Google me,
Where
find me.
where are you the most active on?
Probably LinkedIn and Instagram,
Perfect.
and soon my new website.
Amazing. Thank you so much for.
Thank you so
I've
much,
learned
Inder.
so much.
Pleasure.
I'm really
pleasure.
grateful that you've come all this way.
I need to reevaluate what I'm eating right now.
Yeah, take
Strictly.
go back to the drawing board, right?
I did want to just maybe next time, but I did want to just talk about the smartphone, because I got rid of
Okay.
my smartphone.
Oh my god!
and
No
I
way.
use this now. Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay.
But we can just talk about it now.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Oh,
Go for it. Go for it.
Well,
Go
we're
for it.
here.
So yeah, go on.
Oh god.
Why, so you use that for calling, or
So, about 6 or 7 years ago, I just realised I was using my smartphone for everything. Literally, it was crazy things. Like I was having a shower and I was watching a film on my phone, and it wasn't even like, these are quite big these days, but
Huge.
Yeah, this was back in the days when it was a lot smaller. The screen was a lot smaller, and I just noticed I was just getting slightly addicted to it. And then I saw a video by a guy called Antoine Creel. I don't know if he rings a bell.
I've not heard of
Have you
it.
ever watched $1 Million Traders? Does that ring a bell? It was the BBC.
Potentially, yeah.
It was a BBC show during the financial crash, and they wanted to demonstrate. Basically, they took these amateurs
Yeah.
and gave them 12 weeks and £1 million, and wanted to see whether they could operate like a hedge fund and grow that money
Oh wow.
in trading equities. Anyway, so he was on that show and he became famous. But he was an ex-Goldman trader, successful. And anyways, he retired at like 30. And anyways, he released a video on YouTube a few years ago, basically saying how he went on holiday one day to like Vietnam or somewhere, and he was lying on the beach, hadn't used his phone for a week. He had a BlackBerry at the time, and all of a sudden he just started downloading all these incredible ideas into his head, and his life just changed. And from that moment, he never used a smartphone again. He just used a dumb phone, like this. And it really resonated with me with that at a time when I just realised I was getting so consumed by my phone. So one day, I just literally bought this Nokia 3310. It doesn't have 4G or anything. Just sends and receives SMSs and phone calls. And I bought this in 2018, I think. So it's 7 years old. Haven't changed it.
You haven't
No
charged
way.
it yet?
It's been charged. Yeah, the
Charged once.
Yeah, the battery is starting to struggle actually.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's kind of it's weird because it's not weird at all actually, but a few years, well, that was 7-8 years ago, and present day now, there's a huge attention on the effects of smartphones on the brains, especially in kids, and I give talks to schools about to parents about the effects of smartphones, and it's scary.
So what are you using your smartphone then for?
Oh yeah, so sorry, I should say. So I have Instagram and WhatsApp. So I have some international clients and relatives. So I do check it maybe half an hour a day. And obviously I do Instagram on it as well. But half an hour a day is allotted. There is no SIM in it. Yeah, and it's just changed my life. And my productivity just went through the roof.
Really?
Mental health improved significantly because I'm totally present. Like if the three of us went for a coffee now and we were on our phones, we would be all over the place. It's rare now that you meet someone who is totally present with you. And there was actually a really cool study done where they took two groups of people. One group would basically be sitting on a table conversing, but they'd have a phone on the table.
Yeah.
And the other group didn't have a phone on the table. And the group who had the phone on the table perceived each other on the table as less empathetic, less interesting, and less caring
Wow.
than the group who didn't have the phone. And the phone was off. The phone was off, but the phone was there.
It's funny. I always notice when either a friend or this is before I met my partner, but when I was dating, whenever I went on a date and the date put the smartphone on the table, I knew psychologically she wasn't going to be in this date properly. So I sort of was like, okay, if you're going to have the phone on the table, clearly your mind is thinking about something else psychologically, like subconsciously.
Exactly.
And I took that as like maybe you're not being present in
Yeah.
this, or maybe you, I don't know. And I read something about that where it was like if someone had a smartphone on the table, it implied that they weren't coming to the table present. Because I think also eating as well, if you're going to be at a table and break fast, or it's quite when you think about eating or sharing a meal or conversing with someone, it's quite like
Like ritualistic.
it's ritualistic. It's almost like tribal. Like that's how like if I think about having dinner with my parents and my family at the table, my mum straight away is like absolutely no phone, because that is where sacred. Yeah. And I think that should definitely be. But just to ask you as well, what other significant changes did you see in your life the moment that you switched to using a phone?
Greater presence.
Yeah.
Greater connectivity to the people around me, greater creativity as well, and you engage parts of your brain that you've not used in a very long time,
That's
which is just
interesting.
fantastic. So for example, just directions. So like I would write down the postcode, for example.
Oh, so you're not even using it for like GPS and that?
Well, no, because you can't, because I'd only have this with me, and this doesn't have a SIM, so I have no data.
Oh my god.
So I have no data.
So how
So
do
you're
you,
not even using it for like
maps or anything.
maps or anything,
No.
like it's just purely for clients on WhatsApp and Instagram.
Yeah, and I have to be at home or connected to Wi-Fi, so I only have this at home.
So how did you get here from Windsor?
I was going to ask the same question.
Well, luckily I know this area, so
Oh.
and I put the post. But for example, actually, this is a good situation because a good example, because I put the postcode in, but I didn't know exactly where it was, so I parked up and I just used my navigational instincts.
This is fascinating.
Shit.
And remember back in the days, I don't know how old you guys are, but I remember like my dad would go to.
We'd have a map in the back of the
Yeah,
car.
A to Z, exactly.
Yeah.
So
So-
we'd find it. We'd have to ask direction. We'd have to ask someone.
Yeah.
And I still do that to this day. People look at me a bit weird, but
It's very interesting
That's
because
extraordinary. Oh my God.
I didn't grow up in the UK, but I moved here like 7 years ago, 7, 8. But my sister, she moved to the UK when I was 7, so like 21 years ago. So she mentioned to me that when she was going for like job interviews, she used to use the book.
the A to Z.
Yes,
Yeah.
So she had to like write it down the exact route, how to get to the specific place. Whereas me, I just use GPS on my phone, and it just literally tells me which train to get, which station to go to, which bus to take.
It's not working.
It's crazy. I haven't even thought about it.
And even something really stupid like when you're on the tube or an overground train, like what everyone is on.
Everyone is on
bloody
their phones,
phone
yeah.
with their headphones in, right? But I've noticed recently, like because obviously I don't have one, I'm just standing there, and then I'll like lock eyes with someone and we'll just start talking.
Mm.
And before you know it, I've made a friend or met, had an
Yeah.
interesting conversation. I'm far more engaged.
In terms of like, I'm just thinking other uses for an iPhone that I use, like music or scheduling, so calendars.
It's all bullshit, honestly.
Really?
It's all bullshit.
Okay, fine.
Everyone says that, what do I do with, maps and dating and heart rate variability? It's all bullshit. What did you do before the phone came along?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's all bullshit.
Okay, just general calendars then. So when you're thinking about.
So full disclosure, I have a Mac, like I have a laptop.
Yeah.
So you use the calendar in there. Like, I don't know about you guys. I keep saying I'm making myself sound really old, but like I remember the days at school where like computers were big clunky boxes, right? And it was like quite a big deal to go into the computer room and use the computer for a project.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of crazy to think that machine now sits in our little pocket and we do everything in our day-to-day life. So I treat the laptop the same way, or my computer the same way as I used to as a kid. Like it was a special, it's a sacred time, like a meal.
Tool. Yeah.
When I'm on the laptop, and I'm doing the work that I need to do.
I guess that really helps for you to get a lot more focus, because when you mentioned that you use bed only for sleep and sex, and you don't even meditate in the bed, hence when it comes to work, you just work on your laptop. You don't just watch YouTube or like.
I mean, look, I'm human. I do enjoy a good YouTube video. But the point.
But you get the point.
I'm on the laptop and I'm just watching the YouTube video. I'm not watching the YouTube video, texting my friend, texting someone else on WhatsApp, going back to the computer and switching.
Yeah.
Switching is one of the surefire ways to really not develop ADHD, but certainly develop ADHD-like behaviors. Switching.
Because that's really interesting, because I think there's at least from what I've seen and read, there's a rise in ADHD cases.
Yeah.
And that, I feel, sort of coincides maybe with smartphone usage or all of these sort of stimulations that we have. Like, for example, my sister, when we're at home and let's say it's Christmas time, she's got a phone there, she's got her laptop, and she's watching TV at the same time. Oh. And I'm like, how do you do that? And she's like, I'm a woman, I can multitask. I was like, no, you fucking can't. But she has this ability where she's doing all. I was like, my mum would walk in and she's like, you're on 3 screens right now. Like, go outside for fuck's sake. But it's I really see your point where it's like, okay, if you're going to be doing something, because you're never gonna, if you've got a smartphone, texting and watching TV, you're doing both things badly, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, if you're going to do one thing, just do one thing at a time. When I'm on the laptop, I try to just focus on that time there. But then, like, there's always
something that comes up,
distractions coming up, phone calls to have, and
well, you touched on an interesting point. Where was I? I was at a very high-end hotel that was interested in expanding its well-being offering. And I was talking with the director of the business, and they had this very famous psychologist who comes in to evaluate CEOs, top-level CEOs, like CEOs of huge companies, for their insurance forms, because a lot of them are public companies.
Wow.
And she was chatting with this director, and she basically said most of them would fit the criteria for ADHD.
Really?
And it's interesting because to get businesses off the ground and to you have to be like what you just described, in the kitchen, on the computer, having a conversation.
Yeah.
But it's a balance. Those types of people also tend to be really crap in their love life and not the most empathetic people either. So it's a balance.
It's really fascinating. I totally resonate with that. Like, because when you're doing so many moving things all at once, that has an effect on everything. Effects on your relationships, your mood, doing things, your attention span, your level of focus, I think, mainly as well. It's hard. Like, one of my friends that owned a food business and sold it, he moved to Bali.
Nice.
And he started an online business there. And when I spoke to him sort of about his journey, he said it took him 2 years just to get out of a London phase of life.
Mindset, kind of.
Just mindset, and he had like really sort of like, he was all over the place.
Yeah.
But he's working long hours. He's doing like 18-hour days. long stints. But then that's you could argue, is that what it takes in order to get to a business at that point to sell it?
You read my mind.
Yeah.
I do think that the ruthless and relentless pursuit to getting the job done is a quality that a lot of these people have in common.
Yeah, sometimes like to the detriment of your health. Maybe that's why people don't do it, because it's really hard and it's takes a toll on your body mentally, physically. Maybe you just have to push through some of those obstacles and barriers in order for you to get that business off the ground.
Yeah.
But I mean, even for me, I've noticed a huge change and I'm 30 now, and I've spent the last 7.5 years doing it, and now I'm like, this is taking a bit of a toll on me, for sure.
That's when 29, 30, 31 is when things start catching up with you. You've got to be careful.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a balance, and it's really hard, and I haven't cracked that yet. I'll
Yeah.
tell you when I'm on the other side.
Yeah.
But,
Hopefully both of us.
Yeah, when we're on the other side, we can talk about it.
Crying to each other's arms. It's so difficult.
I would just, coming back full circle, I will also say that there are a lot of business people who do really well and make it look quite easy.
Yeah.
And I've always been really interested in this idea. I don't know if you guys know Ali Abdul. Abdul, he was a doctor, Cambridge trained turned productivity guy. He said something that really blew my mind. He was like he was doing a video with someone. I think it was a flatmate, and one of the questions that one of the audience questions was something along the lines of like, what adversity have you had to overcome in your life? And his colleague said like, I don't know, I lost my dad for cancer, or I came to this country with no money, blah 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 blah. He just kind of almost smugly went, I've never really had any adversity. Not really. And I think that blew my mind, because it highlights a really important point, that if we have an optimal or an optimized nervous system, our brains will make the most correct and efficient decisions. And if you can make the most effective and correct decisions, the path towards your goal is going to be much more streamlined. Because a lot of people describe, especially overworked business people like yourself, describe kind of feeling like they've got one foot on the accelerator and one foot on the brake all the time. They're like fighting themselves a little bit. And that can often be a sign of the nervous system not really firing as smoothly as it should be.
Yeah.
But when you clear out the metals, when you do the detoxification and you rebalance the autonomic nervous system, it's almost like, holy shit, I'm like superhuman. Just the answers are flowing. I know what to do. The words are coming out.
Limitless.
And we're moving forward, yeah. A little bit like limitless, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's something else to bear in mind.
I suppose, like you're saying, you're processing obstacles in situations where it's not as overwhelming. You're able to look at something like however adversity comes, and maybe have like a different perspective on it, and go, okay, well, I'm going to just let that kind of roll over. I'm going to, not let it get to me, hold on to it, and create more tension. I can look at it differently.
Ali Abdul is a great example, because he was being a little bit disingenuous, because I think his mum was an immigrant doctor, and from my understanding, an only a single parent family. It was just the mum. So obviously, he's probably got issues there. But his point being, he kind of went to school. He was obviously naturally bright, chose the A-levels. He became a doctor. He could just do it. And basically, obviously, med school is not easy, but he got through it because he was capable. Then he had the ideas for the YouTube channels. And his brain was just making these decisions, and hard work is something, and also a slightly weird concept, is hard work is an attribute, it's a skill, it's a cognitive attribute. Like the brain the prefrontal cortex has to really it takes a huge amount of energy, and it's a process. To work hard is not something you necessarily push yourself to do, it's something that the brain does automatically, because we're here to be productive, explosive people. We're here to be productive. And the brain, if you've got a balanced brain, whatever that means exactly, an optimized brain, the nervous system, the brain will just direct the body to do things without really thinking about it, and it will be the correct things. And Ali Abdul's a great example of that. He has just gone from one thing to the other, and obviously we know how big he is now.
Inder, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
My mind is completely blown.
I can see that.
I'm really, really. That was probably the best conversation we've had, and definitely the longest.
Oh, good.
I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming. Honestly,
No,
it's
it's a
been
pleasure.
an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much.
No, like,
Yeah, we look forward to seeing you.
Thank you. Thank you, man.
Thank you.
No
Really
worries.
appreciate it.
No, pleasure.
Cool. Thanks, Will.